farm team. I'd like to introduce Stan Brand, member here, and he's going to talk about the business and the future of grassroots baseball and its special place in America. And he's the vice president of minor league baseball. He's probably one of the more, if not most knowledgeable people about baseball from top to bottom that I've talked with, at least in the past hour. No, I think you're going to enjoy his talk, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce Stan Brand.
Thank you. Some of you may have read my resume that I worked for Tip O'Neill, Speaker Tip O'Neill for 11 years. Most recently as General Counsel for the House of Representatives when he was Speaker. And Tip, being Irish, always told me to warm the crowd up with a story before you get into the meat of what you're going to speak about. So I was counsel to the House, and this is a great crowd for me because you'll be old enough to remember a woman named Madeleine Murray O'Hair, who sued over a bunch of things. She was an avowed atheist, and she sued to prohibit prayer in public schools and other things. So in the 1980s, she sued the House of Representatives and the Senate, alleging that the chaplain that we have, who's an officer of the House and who opens the sessions with prayer, was an unconstitutional infringement on the First Amendment. And so it fell to me to defend the case, and we won in the district court. It went to the Court of Appeals. We appeared before then Circuit Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We lost, and we sought appeal to the entire D.C. Circuit, which was 12 judges. And so we appeared in the case, very hotly contested oral argument, and I brought the chaplain with me to the oral argument. And it was very heated, and when it was over, he sort of walked out with me and he grabbed my sleeve and he said, "You know, Stan, how do you think it went?" And I said, "Well, you know, Chaplain Ford, it's a very sad day when a man of the cloth turns to a lawyer to be saved." But we did win the case. So let me turn to the business and magic of minor league baseball. First, a bit about the business part. The position that I've served in, which is vice president of the National Association of Professional Baseball Leagues, which is the governing body of minor league baseball, comprised of 186 teams in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, playing at the AAA, AA, Single A, Short Season A, and rookie levels. And this has been an institution that's been around since 1901. It is a organization comprised of clubs that are owned mostly by independent businessmen or groups of owners. Some of the clubs are owned by their major league affiliates. The Atlanta Braves, for instance, own all of their minor league teams as a matter of control. There has been a trend in recent years for major league clubs to take ownership interest in minor league clubs for purposes of determining roster control and other things, and also to participate in the economic rewards that have come to be associated with much of minor league baseball. So the fact is that minor league baseball draws, second only to Major League Baseball, more in-stadium fans than any other sport in North America. 44 million people a year attend minor league baseball games, which is ahead of the NFL, ahead of the NHL, ahead of the NBA, and many of the other sports. So it is ingrained in the American psyche and has been for 100 years or more. You know, if you watch the Ken Burns series on baseball, which I did, all 12, and I actually have those 12 tapes in my cabinet, Ken Burns really explains partially why baseball is part of the fabric of America. You really can't understand America. Race relations, labor relations, industrialization, urbanization, all the things that are part of the American frame are inextricably intertwined with baseball, and to a large extent, minor league baseball. Now, the two things that I think distinguish minor league baseball from Major League Baseball, one, in a way, the goal in minor league baseball is not to win. The goal in minor league baseball is to develop players who can become skilled enough to make it on a 40-man roster and reap the riches of the collective bargaining agreement that has been arrived at over the last decades. Now, when people ask me, well, how hard is it to get on a 40-man roster? And so what I explain to people is each year in the first-year player draft, which is where the major leagues draft players from around the country for introduction into the minor league system, they draft roughly 17 or 1,800 players a year. Some from high school, some from college. Or recently, many more from college than from high school. There's a reason for that, which I'll get to later. Of those 1,800 players, between 5 and 10 will ever spend one day on a major league roster. Now, these 1,800 are among the most skilled and adept players of the millions of kids who play baseball at all levels. So you can see how competitive and difficult it is. Someone mentioned to me Scott Boros, who's an agent who represents a lot of players, including a lot of Nats players. And my experience with Scott Boros is not a good one. The story I always tell, and the major league owner who I'm friendly with, Jerry Reinsdorf, who owns the Chicago White Sox, so he says to me, you know, you need to remind everybody about Scott Boros. Well, maybe 20 years ago, Scott Boros represented a guy named, I forget who it was. He was a very highly touted minor league player. And the Phillies drafted him. And of course, drafting is only the first step. Then you have to sign the player to a uniform player contract. And Boros convinced this kid that he shouldn't sign with Philadelphia. He should go somewhere else. And under the rules of the draft, the team that drafts you has a right to sign you, and no one else can sign you until they release you. And Boros told him, at first Boros challenged his signing by saying, well, they sent his contract to the wrong address. And so as a result of that, he was free to go to another team. And that didn't work. And then he told this kid, go to Costa Rica for a year and renounce your U.S. citizenship and come in outside the player draft, because the foreign players weren't covered by the domestic draft. And that's not what he did. He eventually signed with somebody, not the Phillies. The Phillies gave up on him. But that's, that's what goes on at the business end of minor league baseball. Now, so the goal in minor league baseball is not to win, it's to develop players. So, for instance, if you go up to Frederick, or you go to Bowie, or you go to Prince William, or Hagerstown, any of the minor league teams that are around here, and you'll be watching the game, and you'll see a pitcher pitching, and he's throwing a very good game. There's, not a lot of hits. He's kept the other team scoreless. And then in the fourth inning, you'll see he's taken out of the game. You'll say to yourself, why would you take out a pitcher who's shut out the other team, performing well, after the fourth inning? Because the goal in minor league baseball is not to win, it's to develop the player. And understand that in the first rounds of the player draft, the major leagues have spent roughly $250 million on signing bonuses. So when you sign that player and you put him in the game, you want to see that your $1 million investment has the chance to make it onto a 40-man roster. So you don't want him to go over a certain pitch count. until he has reached a level of development that allows him to do that. Some of you may remember, if you're Baltimore Oriole fans, a guy named Ben McDonald, who pitched for LSU, and he pitched in the World Series. What happened to Ben McDonald? His college coach, who cared nothing about player development, but about winning the College World Series, overpitched Ben McDonald. And so when he got to the major leagues, he never really got to the level that everyone expected, because he'd been subjected to stress at a level that prevented him from reaching his potential. So the goal in minor league baseball is different. It is the research and development arm of Major League Baseball. And Major League Baseball and minor league baseball have been joined together in an agreement called the Professional Baseball Agreement, which defines the relative responsibilities and economic relationships of the minor leagues to the major leagues. And that agreement has been in one form or another around for over 100 years. In fact, it's up for renegotiation in the next year or so. So the goal of minor league baseball is different. And when I say minor league baseball, what I'm talking about is that part of minor league baseball that we call part of organized baseball. That is, the teams that are affiliated with Major League Baseball and subject ultimately to the jurisdiction of the commissioner. There are a number of leagues that have been around, some for longer than others, that are so-called independent leagues. Those are leagues that are not formally affiliated and don't receive the subsidy and the economic support that we get from Major League Baseball. So years ago, the late, great Peter McGowan, who owned the San Francisco Giants, and somebody that I developed a relationship, called me one day and he said, you know, I have this venture capitalist friend in California. He's interested in purchasing a minor league club, but he doesn't understand the business. Will you explain it to him? I said, sure. So this guy flew in from San Francisco, and I took him out to the Bowie Bay Sox. And it was a beautiful spring night, and the stars were out, and we're having a grand time sitting there in the stands. And he looked at it, he said, this is the greatest business in the world, but I don't understand how you make money here. I said, well, it's very simple. Let me explain it to you. You see those guys running around on the field in the uniforms? He said, yeah. I said, you don't pay them. The major leagues pay them. They're under the control of the major leagues for the uniform player contract. I said, you see all that signage out in center field? Count up those signs. 50 signs out there, $12,000 a piece. This is 25 years ago. I said, look at the crowd. What do you think the crowd here is tonight? Oh, it's probably 4,000. I said 4,000 times 15. That's the what we call the per capita. That's the amount of money that each person who comes in the stadium spends on a hot dog or a hat or whatever. And he looked at me and said, oh, I see how you can make money here. If you draw fans. So the Dayton Dragons, who are the single-A Midwest League affiliate of the Cincinnati Reds, they drew 550,000 fans. So you can understand the math. Now, in the old days, these franchises could be bought for a song because the major leagues abandoned them in the 1950s. When television came into baseball and major league games started to be broadcast into minor league markets, minor league baseball tanked. And what Major League Baseball did was unload ownership of these clubs onto people who would buy them. And there was a guy, as an example, named Miles Wolff in Durham, North Carolina, who bought the Durham Bulls. He bought the Durham Bulls for $1,000. 10 years later, he sold the Durham Bulls for $8 million. 5 years ago, a local businessman, venture capitalist, bought the Dayton Dragons for $35 million. Now you ask, what is the economics of that? Well, the economics of that is something that we call in baseball the greater fool theory. Which is that because of the magic of baseball and the lure it has for the American psyche and the role that it has played in our society all these years, there's always somebody out there who wants to be part of baseball, who thinks it's the business they want to be in, who's attracted to the magic of the game. They don't always make the best owners, particularly at the major league level. And Major League Baseball is rife with examples of people who have bought teams thinking they are like other businesses, only to learn the hard way that there's a lot of different issues and variables that come into play when you are owning and running a major league team. The other difference in minor league baseball and major league baseball is to some extent the players. And I used to have the benefit of being able to go to all the All-Star games every year. And so I always used to take my sons to the All-Star game. That was a big thing we did in the summer. And, you know, I would get all the tickets to the great stuff, you know, Players Breakfast and the Home Run Derby and Fan Fest and everything. So I took them to Dallas where the All-Star game was. And we always got to stay in the hotel where the players were. And so there would be hundreds of kids milling around looking for autographs. And I'll never forget this. We were going through the lobby, and there were two major league players of tremendous note. Carlos Baerga, who used to play for the Cleveland Indians, and Sammy Sosa. And all these kids were clamoring to get their autographs. The problem was they were surrounded by their bodyguards, and the kids couldn't get access to the players for autographs. Now, in the minor leagues, that would never happen. In fact, in the minor leagues, when players go to some of these venues and some of these towns, they live with the families. They eat with the families. So when I went to Las Vegas last year, and I ran into an owner, he still has a relationship with the major league players who played for the Las Vegas Stars when they were on his team. And so the bond, the accessibility of players in the minor leagues is tremendous. It's like it used to be in the 30s and 40s in Major League Baseball, when, you know, Preacher Rowe and Pee Wee Reese and the Dodgers lived in the neighborhood. When Willie Mays, in a famous picture, is in Harlem playing stickball in the street with the kids in the neighborhood. So those are the major differences. Yes?
There's one major difference that is part of the reason why they have host families. The difference is in salary. If you can address.
Sure. Yeah,
how
well,
they get paid in minors.
Yeah, I'll address that because there have been two existential crises that minor league baseball has faced in my tenure in 30 years with the National Association. The first one was the antitrust attempt to repeal the antitrust exemption in the 90s, and the second one was a lawsuit that a bunch of former minor league players filed against Major League Baseball under the Fair Labor Standards Act, alleging that not we, but major leagues had not paid them in accordance with the Fair Labor Standards Act, either minimum wage or wages for overtime. And their allegation and the complaint, very complicated legal case, but the class action and the theory was, well, you're not paying us for our time on the bus, you're not paying us for the time we spend taking batting practice, you're not paying us for the time we spend going to the gym to stay in shape, and you should be, that's work time under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Now, what have been the pay scales in minor league baseball? At the single A level, $1,140 a month, plus per diem when you travel, meal money, hotels, and health care. Now, this became the subject of a lawsuit. Now, why are salaries so low? Well, because these aren't careers. These are tryouts. These are not lifetime jobs. So when we were lobbying Congress to exempt professional baseball players from the requirements of the Fair Labor Standards Act, we went in to see a bunch of House members and senators, and one of the senators we went to see was former Senator Al Franken, before his demise. And we pitched our defense of how minor league players were paid to Al Franken. We said, this isn't a career. Most of these players currently today playing minor league baseball will be gone in 2 years. As my friend Scott Boros said in a New Yorker article about minor league baseball years ago, I tell the people that I sign, minor league baseball is not an opportunity, it's a trap door. Because the opportunity to get to the promised land of a 40-man roster is very minimal. So Al Franken, of all people, said, oh, I understand. That's like when I was coming up in the comedy circuit and I would play in a comedy club in New York for nothing because I was trying to make it. I was trying to hone my skills to get to Saturday Night Live. And so I was willing to do that for nothing on the hope that I would get to the big time. That has been the rationale. Now, as you go up the ladder, you get paid more. I think maybe AAA players get paid at a $5,000 a month rate. Understand as well that if you happen to go from a minor league roster to a major league roster, as these players do, ferry back and forth, you will be paid at a per day rate for a major league player under the collective bargaining agreement. The minimum for a major league player under the collective bargaining agreement is $575,000 a year. So you will get that rate for as many days as you spend on a major league roster. With the passage of the Save America's Pastime Act, these players are all now paid minimum wage, and the commissioner has said that they will be getting a raise at some point this year because their pay hasn't really been adjusted in decades. Now, people say, well, that seems unfair. But again, what many of these players, when they were asked to join the lawsuit and declined to join the lawsuit, said, well, you know, we're trying to get to the big time. We're not trying to just get minimum wage. We're trying to get onto a major league roster. And just so you understand the magnitude of what that means for somebody, when I came into baseball in 1991, the average major league player was making $1.1 million. Today, the average major league player is making $4.6 million. That's the average. So the hope, the aspiration of these players to get to a major league roster remains the motivating factor. And because so few of them make it, it has become, you know, a quest and a difficult one. So that's the business coupled a little bit with the magic. The industry, I think, as a whole, is in good shape. Now, not every club, not every franchise is in the kind of shape that the Dayton Dragons or the Bowie Bay Sox are. We have teams in Kinston, North Carolina. We have teams in Jamestown, New York, some of them owned by municipalities. And they're not, you know, the clubs in the New York Penn League, with the exception of the Cyclones who are in New York City, are not, you know, are not drawing 550,000 fans. In Fishkill, New York, maybe they're drawing 150,000. Or we used to have a team in Oneonta, which drew maybe 90,000. Or Jamestown, or Batavia, or some of these other smaller venues. One of the arguments that we made to the Congress when we were battling the repeal of the antitrust exemption was baseball exists in small-town America, in Clinton, Iowa, in Burlington, Iowa, in Great Falls, Montana, in Bend, Oregon. It exists in those places because we are exempt from attack under the antitrust laws. And we are able to put teams there and sustain teams there because we have something called the minor league reserve clause that allows us to control the talent for 6 years. Now, some of you may remember the fight that the players union had in the 70s over free agency. There used to be the legal fiction that players were under control of the major leagues in perpetuity. There was no freedom to move from one team to the other. In fact, Curt Flood filed a lawsuit, went to the Supreme Court and lost. And you know, the major league clubs were able to control the talent through the reserve clause. So in 1956, after Mickey Mantle won the Triple Crown and went into George Weiss's office, the then general manager of the New York Yankees, and said, I won the Triple Crown last year. I won $100,000. Think about how quaint that is. If you think about the $330 million that Bryce Harper signed for, $100,000. And George Weiss said, I'll give you 75 and you'll like it. That was because of the reserve clause. And then a man named Marvin Miller, Jewish labor lawyer, from Pittsburgh, who worked for the steel workers, took over the union, and he challenged the reserve clause as a matter of arbitration, and he broke the reserve clause when an arbitrator held that the major league interpretation of the reserve clause was wrong, and that players were only reserved year to year. That opened up the salaries of major league players, and that's what we have today. So that's what they are looking for when they are rostered to a minor league team in the Pioneer League or the New York Penn League or the Northwest League. They're looking for a shot at that promised land that so few of them make. And we, in minor league baseball, that's the system that we run. That's the system that we provide as partners with Major League Baseball as the player development arm. So I hope that gives you some view into what is often an opaque system. It's hard sometimes to fathom what's going on, but the business of baseball, to me, is as fascinating as the game is. And I'll tell one story which I think illustrates how I've stayed in my lane as the vice president of minor league baseball. You know, we're all fans, and so we all think we know more than the general managers and the owners and the player development people and the scouts. We all know why the Nats aren't where they should be. And what I have done is stayed in my business lane. And so when I ran for president of minor league baseball in 1991, which is how I got to be vice president, a failed presidential bid led me to be vice president. And I'll tell that story in a minute as well. I ran and I presented myself to the baseball winter meetings, which were being held in Miami Beach in 1991, as a candidate for president of the minor leagues. And of course, you know, this was baseball's executive elite. And I'm walking in and I'm meeting, and nepotism is big in baseball. So, you know, I'm meeting Andy McPhail. I'm meeting all these names, Branch Rickey III. You know, these are the sons and grandsons of iconic baseball legends. And here I am, a Washington criminal lawyer running for president of the NA, and people are saying, what is this guy doing here? And minor league baseball had just concluded a very acrimonious negotiation with Major League Baseball for a new professional baseball agreement. In fact, had almost come to a point of dissolution of the relationship that had been around for 90 years. They got back together, they signed a deal, and so they were looking for maybe someone from outside baseball. So I presented myself as that outsider who had some sense of the bigger world outside of baseball. And I was going around introducing myself, and I had to go to each league and give a speech. And I had to go to the Midwest League, and I went to the Eastern League. And the Eastern League is, you know, the Trenton Thunder, the Reading Phillies, the Binghamton, whatever they are now. They've come up with some really bizarre names. Bowie. And I presented myself. And there was an owner in the back who got up, and he said, well, you know, we understand that you're a big-time lawyer in Washington, and, you know, you work for Tip O'Neill, but you're really here because you love baseball and you're a fan, right? I said, no, I'm not here as a fan. I'm here because you got your head handed to you in a negotiation with Major League Baseball, and you have a lot of baseball people who understand baseball. You don't understand anything about politics. You don't understand anything about public relations. You don't understand anything about the larger world and how David and Goliath fights play out in the world. And the guy was braced, and he said, oh, okay. And he wound up voting for me. Because he decided this is a perspective we don't have that we need. And that's how I got into minor league baseball. So when I came back, after making essentially a backroom deal with the guy who ultimately became president, because what happened was I got to the meetings and I convinced 2 AAA leagues that they should support me. The AAA leagues in the vote for president had 3 votes. The AA leagues had 2. The single A leagues had 1. And you had to win by 3/4 of the votes. So I had 2 AAA leagues. So no one could get elected without those 6 votes that I had. And so the man who ultimately became the president called me up to his hotel room. And he said, you know, you've really made a great impression here, but do you really want to be president of minor league baseball? I said, no. I want to be the outside guy who handles and helps you politically and with your negotiations and your posture vis-a-vis the real world. And he said, well, I'll hire you to do that if you go tell your leagues to vote for me. So I did. I had a big conference with the Pacific Coast League and the other league, and I said to them, look, I've had this meeting with Mike Moore. He's agreed to bring me on as the outside person, and in return for your voting for him. He was elected and he hired me. And that's how my entrance into minor league baseball was achieved. So I came back to Washington, and I went over to the Palm Restaurant, which some of you may know is, as affectionately as I call it, the lawyer's McDonald's. And sitting in the back was my old boss and mentor, Tip O'Neill, smoking a cigar. You could do that in those days in the restaurants. And he called me over and he said, sit down. He said, how the hell did you become vice president of minor league baseball? And I said, Mr. O'Neill, I took a page out of your book. I made a backroom deal with the guy who was president, and he made me vice president. He laughed. So that's how I got into this business, and I've been in it ever since. If, God forbid, anything ever happened to the person who's president, I'd be president of the minor leagues, at least for an interim period until we figured out who really should be president of minor leagues.
A heartbeat away.
Yeah, heartbeat away. So that's the presentation. Any questions? Or? Thank you.
I come at it from a slightly different perspective. 12 years as a host family for minor league ball players.
Where?
Potomac.
Oh, okay.
Which is now no more.
Yeah, it's going to Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
So that's Art Silver's team.
Yeah. So there's One, I have a comment, then I have a question. Yes, the players get whatever per month, but they only get it in season, they don't get
Correct.
it during spring training.
Correct.
And they are expected to maintain, when they leave at the end of the season, they're given a program that they need to follow to stay in shape.
Yes.
So.
In fact, that's the plaintiff's main evidence in the case for the proposition that they're under the control of the major leagues.
Yeah, I happen to know one of the plaintiffs, spent a fair amount of time in my house. But the question is, what kind of oversight do you have of the owners for how they're running their operation?
Tremendous oversight. They're all subject to the National Association agreement. They're all subject to discipline and review by the president of the minor leagues. We have financial requirements, financial responsibility requirements. And, you know, we have a thing that we run called Baseball University, which we now require every owner to come to every 5 years in Florida, where we essentially indoctrinate and orient them on the very, very thick set of rules that we have with respect not only to the operation of their clubs, but the other businesses that we're in. Licensing, intellectual property, charities, you know, all of this. So there is heavy, heavy supervision. In fact, the president of the minor leagues has authority to fine, has authority to take over clubs that are financially not in meeting the debt-to-equity ratios in the agreement. So there's heavy, heavy supervision.
Have you ever taken away a team?
Yes. We've fined owners, we've kicked people out, not easy. We've had a lot of lawsuits over people who have been upset with how we've supervised them. We had an owner who will remain anonymous, who was violating the anti-gambling rules. And yeah, gambling in baseball, although that's changing, pursuant to the Supreme Court's decision. So yes, very, very heavy. And in addition to which, the commissioner and Major League Baseball requires us to do certain things, and if we don't do them, we have a problem.
What percentage?
Wait for the mic.
I think you'll get that.
So the movie Bull Durham,
Yes.
how realistic is that to minor league baseball?
Well, it's interesting that you raised that. For years, I did programs at the Smithsonian on minor league baseball. And one year, I did them with ESPN, and we televised it. And what I did was I found Crash Davis, the original Crash Davis, the Kevin Costner character. And he lived in North Carolina, and I flew him to Washington. I paid for his airfare. I got him a limousine. I had him driven out to Bowie to throw out the first pitch. And I asked him, how accurate was the movie? He said, well, on the baseball side, it was very accurate. On the romance side, that was Hollywood. But the baseball side was very, very true to real life.
Of your teams, what are the percentage of Americans versus, say, Puerto Ricans, Venezuelans?
Yeah. Well, the mix has changed over the years. We probably have 8 to 9% African American. We probably have 13% Latin. We have some Australian. We have Curaçaoans. We have a lot of other ethnic and national types. And that has changed. We now have a lot of Korean players, always Japanese players, not so much at the minor league level, but at the major league level. So that has changed. One of the things we've tried to do, and Major League Baseball's tried to do, is increase the minority fan base And one way to increase the fan base is through drafting the players. The problem is that baseball, candidly, has lost out, I think, to basketball and football in the minority communities, other than the Latin community. And so we've tried through the RBI program and other programs to get, to raise that awareness and raise that interest. So that's a work in progress.
So here you are, this Washington lawyer, and you told your wife you want to do what you want to do.
Oh, yeah.
And she said, "You're crazy."
Yeah, she did, actually.
How'd you get involved with this?
Yeah, so, yeah, that's a great story. I was involved in a very high-profile case representing a former George Bush lobbyist who was being subpoenaed by everybody, and in connection with a savings and loan case. And I got into a row with Senator Howard Metzenbaum. And to make a long story short, I filed an ethics complaint against Howard Metzenbaum for releasing my client's private bank information to a reporter for the New York Times. And in fact, I'll never forget this. When I filed the ethics complaint, I got a call from my good friend Bob Strauss, who said, "You know, Stan, you just don't go around filing ethics complaints against ranking Democratic members of the Congress." And I said, "Well, I do when they violate my client's rights." What that resulted in is my being fired from my non-paying job as parliamentarian to the DNC, which I'd done for 10 years thanks to my relationship with Tip O'Neill. So I was sitting on the subway reading the newspaper, the Baseball America, and I read the article about the minor league situation and them looking for a new president. And I said, you know, the hell with the DNC. I'm finished with them. I'm going to try something else. I'm going to run for president of minor league baseball. And I went across the street to a resume advisor, and I said, look, you know, I'm going to run for president of minor league baseball. She looked at me askance. And I called a friend of mine, a public relations guy who I'd known for years, who had worked for Senator Warren Rudman. I said, look, I'm going to run for minor league president of minor. He said, wow. He said, how are you going to convince them that you should have that job? And I said, well, you're going to help me. And so we crafted a resume for me that emphasized the things that I thought they would be receptive to, that would help me explain to them why they should consider someone like me, never expecting really to get anywhere. And I sent the resume and the letter off to the search committee, and I went about my business, never expecting to hear from them. And about 3 weeks later, I got a call from a guy named Bob Beban, who was the head of the search committee. He was an owner of a club in Eugene, Oregon, the Eugene Emeralds, in the Northwest League, still there. And he said, you know, we got your resume, it's very interesting, we'd like to talk to you. I said, okay, where's that going to be? Well, come down to Atlanta during the World Series, we're having our meetings, and you'll come and you'll be interviewed and we'll talk about it. So I show up at the hotel and I'm waiting outside the conference room to go in to be interviewed, and out of the room comes none other than Bowie Kuhn, former commissioner. He's in the running for this job that I'm asking for, and he's former commissioner. Now, what I learned later is Bowie never really wanted the job because he never wanted to run for election, and he wanted 9 times the amount of money that they were offering the president. So that was, but in any event, I went into the room, I spent about an hour and a half talking to them about my perception of their situation, what I could do, how I could help them, and I left. And I went back to my business and I said, boy, that was interesting. I'm sure I'll never hear from them. About a month later, I got a call from Bob Beban, and he said, you know, we've interviewed 20 people, and we have 4 candidates for president, and you're one of them. And I said, what happens now? Now you have to go to Florida to the winter meetings, and you have to go around and meet everybody, and meet and greet, and convince everybody that you should be president of minor league baseball, at which point my wife said, well, you know, A, you live in Washington, the law firm that you founded and work in is in Washington, the building that you own that the law firm is in is on 15th Street, and the pay is about a quarter of what you're making in private practice. So what are you doing? I said, I don't know, I'm gonna go to Florida and I'm gonna figure it out. And what happened was I went down, I made my case, and I figured out a way to, in a sense, explain to them how I could be part of the picture in a constructive way. Look, you know, timing in life is everything. You have to be in the right place at the right time. And so, you know, whether you went to Harvard or Yale or whatever, it doesn't matter. What matters is, where are you at the right place at the right time? And I was at the right place at the right time, and I said the right things, and I met people, and they were impressed with what I had to say, and that's how I got into minor league baseball.
Could take a question. We hear how the young kids are treated economically and how dependent they are on the system. Well, we have a star system in Hollywood and we have a star system in business, and we know it's corrupt. Are there issues like this, sexual abuse of these young guys in baseball, and is it something that lands in your office?
No, I would say. I mean, not that I've heard. What we have had, which is what was on the front page of the Washington Post today, which is the corruption in the foreign export of players from Cuba and other places, with the Buscones, who are the local agents, and the economic issues, and the agents who are taking, you know, 37% of the salaries and paying people to smuggle them out of the country. And in fact, there's a grand jury investigation in DC into all of that. So there is that issue. You know, we had a steroids issue, which we got through. You know, we haven't had abuse issues. We've had issues of economic parity. That's been our main issue.
Thank you. So, forgive me for two quick questions.
Sure.
The first one's probably pretty easy. These young guys who are in the minor leagues, do they understand that they are indeed trying out? Or do they think that this could be a career staying in the minor leagues? But can I please ask the other, which is tangential a little bit. I'm thinking about all the old timers, played the 40s, 50s, and 60s. How resentful are they of the money? And is there indeed some mechanism for paying them from the past?
So the first question is, answer to the first question is, I mean, they're generally aware. They understand the odds.
Right.
And they're taking the shot nonetheless. You know, some of them are released and go play in the independent leagues. I mean, some of them are slower to give up the dream than others.
Right.
I actually ran into some of them teaching at Penn State Law School, where I had a kid who had been drafted, and I had spent a lot of time talking to him about it. And he said he knew what the odds were. And you know, part of it is luck. The athletic director at my college had a son who was a free agent, was playing in the Northwest League for the San Diego Padres affiliate. And he was a talented kid, and it came time in the season, because remember, it's up or out. You know, you're playing in rookie level for half a season, you're going to single A, you know, if you're not moving up in 4 years to AAA in a major league, you know, you're not going to be around. So this kid's critical time came to be promoted or not to the next level. I think it would have been the AA level. And it was down to him and another pitcher, a Latin kid. And his numbers were actually better. And what happened? Well, he was released. Why was he released? Because the signing bonus that they paid to the Latin kid of $150,000 at that time was of such a magnitude that no one felt comfortable explaining to the front office why they were promoting the kid who was a free agent they paid nothing for versus the kid who they paid $150,000 for.
Investment.
Right. So the powers that be said, well, we're going to promote the other kid. Now, what happened, I don't know. And the second question of
But
resentment,
hold on.
yeah, I wouldn't say resentment. I would say amazement. Amazement and as incredulous as we are about what has happened to Major League salaries and bonuses. I think I mentioned, at the minor league level, they're paying $250 million a year in signing bonuses. Major League Baseball is spending roughly $500 million a year or more on player development. So, the numbers are staggering. I wouldn't say resentment, I'd say amazement. Like the Bryce Harper deal. And talk about greater fool. I mean, I was in the minority when Steven Strasburg was coming out of college and people were saying, well, we're going to pay him $50 million. And what I remembered at that time was Sandy Alderson, who'd been the general manager of the Oakland A's, and actually, contrary to the book, the actual progenitor of the Moneyball theory.
Billy Bob.
And Billy Beane was his deputy, and Billy was, inculcated by Sandy. And I'll never forget sitting in my office with Sandy, and Sandy saying to me, I'm not going to spend $2 million to draft a pitcher. He says, that's ridiculous. I'm going to go to the Dominican Republic, and I'm going to draft 150 players with that $2 million. And at the end of 3 years, I'm going to have more major league talent than anybody who spends $2 million on one player. So, there's that.
I calculated last year, Bryce Harper gets somewhere around $44,000 per at-bat. Does that surprise you?
No.
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 Yeah, every time he comes to the plate.
Hi, I have one incident and one question. The incident, my wife and I went to a game, Everett, Yakima, Washington, a minor league team, and they had Gaylord Perry there, who they paid to sign autographs to increase the attendance. As far as the question, with the team spending millions and millions of dollars on their scouting, so that they want to make the right picks, and the first round draft choices getting billions and millions of dollars. Of the 1,800 players drafted per year, can you talk about the number that actually make a major league roster, please?
Yeah, well, the numbers are what they are, 5 to 10, and the signing bonuses are clustered at the upper reaches of the draft. So, yes, they filter down at the $25,000, $10,000 level, but, Bryce Harper got an $8 million signing bonus. Strasburg got $15 million. So, it's weighted towards the upper reaches of the draft. Now, there are major league owners, and I'll segue into the analytics revolution that we're in, who won't participate in the draft until a certain point because they are convinced that the economics don't warrant it, that their yield, if you will, of players who they draft at those levels is not sufficiently high to justify spending all that money on an unknown, untested player. So, we could all go out and watch a high school game, and we could all pick, the best player on the field. That would be easy. What you couldn't do is pick the player who has the skills who can get from that level to the major leagues. So that's where all the money is being spent now. And honestly, the game has been, I think, taken over by the analytics. So if you go in the front office of any major league club today, instead of the old scouts that you saw in Moneyball, you'll find economists and mathematicians from Harvard and Yale. They're the ones making the baseball decisions.
That was already starting in Moneyball.
It was starting. Now it's gone on steroids. Now it is You know, they want to put chips in these players to measure their performance. They want to analyze them on all types of criteria, numbers and statistics that you and I, as kids, would never have heard of. So the game and the development of players is changing dramatically. And the owners are looking for ways to maximize their investment in figuring out who has the talent to become a major league player. Now, the old school people, and I guess I'm one of them now, would say, yes, the analytics are important and numbers, and there's been a lot of writing about this. Part of what minor league baseball provides is a test tube. So, yes, you can put a guy in the garage, and you can tie him up with electrodes and measure all of the launch angles and the eye speed and the small muscle ticks and all of that, and you can get one thing. And then you can put him in a stadium with 5,000 people, or on a bus or on an airplane traveling, playing 144 games in a season, and that's something else. And the performances aren't necessarily going to be the same. So the argument that the old timers would make is, well, yeah, you have to put these people in realistically similar situations to what they're going to confront when they're in Major League Baseball. And the only way you can do that is through playing games, going on the road, doing the kinds of things that are traditionally done at the minor league level. But that's a debate we're losing.
I'm curious about the many non-players who are involved in minor league baseball, the coaches and the trainers, and the doctors. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, there's a massive employment infrastructure that supports all these teams at every level. So in the minor leagues, there's, you know, a general manager, a sales force, a stadium force, and there are the doctors, the trainers, but all of whom, by the way, at the minor league level, are paid by the major leagues. These players, having now been invested into the tune of $250 million, are very important. And so their medical condition, their physical condition, their mental condition, their life skills. Because remember, you know, you're 17 years old, you're coming from the Dominican Republic, you don't speak English. You need to be chaperoned. You need to be nurtured. You need to have some support. So I knew an agent who exclusively dealt with Latin players, and his phone was available, and he would start getting calls at 12 o'clock at night. Why? Well, they played at night. And when they got done, they would call him. How do I open a checking account? How do I, you know, get a decent meal? How do I get around? I don't have a car. I don't have a license. And, you know, these are kids that haven't been in the world. And so you have to parent them. You know, Bryce Harper's an anomaly. You know, his father is involved, his mother's involved, he's got all the support in the world, but you know, you're a poor kid from Latin America or somewhere else. So you need that support, and there's tons of that. In fact, last year at the winter meetings, I was shocked to talk to the guy from the Dodgers, the player development guy. And this goes to the point about, you know, how do we treat these kids? And he told me that the Dodgers cater from Whole Foods every meal that the players have during the season at home.
Wow.
What does that cost? Now, that doesn't go into the equation of what we're paying them, but all I'm saying is this is the level of...
But that's not industry standard.
Well, it's becoming industry standard because the front office people want these players treated in a way that allows them to develop. So there's a whole structure, and it's expensive.
Speaking of food, Stan brought Cracker Jack. Anybody, there's a lot of passion back there.
Liven it up a little.
My husband is always thrilled.
Do the minor league teams or the minor leagues have any programs to teach these kids from Latin America English? How to speak English?
Yes, we have, at the minor league level and the major league level, life skills courses. In fact, I participated in some of them. A bunch of them came to Washington. We took them up to Capitol Hill to show them around and explain our system. Teaching them a language, getting them settled in an apartment, getting them acclimated with financial situations. Yeah, we spend a lot of time and effort doing that. And that varies from club to club. It is true that there's not an industry-wide standard. Some of these owners really go all out to take care of these kids while they're in their control.
Has the Players Union tried to organize the minor league?
Yeah, so this goes to, I guess, the feud that I had with Donald Fear, who was the old head of the Players Union, when he was the moving force behind revoking the antitrust exemption for baseball. Because in his theory of the world, if the owners were subjected to treble damages under the antitrust laws, they would fold and give the players what they wanted. Well, the side effect of that would be, I think, destruction of the minor leagues. So he was quoted in the Los Angeles Times during spring training one year saying, quote, "We waste too much money on minor league baseball." And so I took that statement, I framed it, and I walked around Capitol Hill, and I hit him over the head with it every place that I could. And people would ask me, why aren't the minor league players unionized? And there are two reasons for that, I think. One is the Major League Players Association doesn't want any part of that because they'd have to share the money. There are 5,500 minor league players. There are 750 players in the Major League Bargaining Unit. Do the math. Now, if you're looking at the salary structure and you're seeing that the average salary is going to $4.5 million a year, are you going to go to your members and say, oh, we should have the minor league players come in and participate and become part of the bargaining unit and give them some of our money? So that's number one. Number two, because these players are not around long enough, most of them, it's very hard to organize them. It's very hard to find someone, some labor union, that would invest enough to have a representation election in 165 places, which is what they'd have to do, to unionize them and then figure out what happens to those players after they leave and the new players coming in. It would be complicated. And no one has, we haven't taken a position for or against it. We've been agnostic. The fact is, no one has ever tried to organize them for those reasons. And I don't think that's likely.
I have two questions. One is, what do people who leave go and do? Is there a pattern? And the second one is, do we have to give you back the prize for the Cracker Jacks?
No, keep it off. Well, you know, some of them have been to college. More and more of them now are in college because the player development people actually want people from college for a lot of reasons. Some of them go off and get jobs. Some of them go on to school. Every year or so, I get a call from a mother in Virginia or Maryland saying, hey, you know, my son was drafted, and I don't know whether he should go to college or he should go play baseball. And I asked her a question. I said, did he get a signing bonus? Yeah. How much did he get? Oh, he got $350,000. I said, okay, take his money, put it in the bank, invest it, let him go play baseball, and when he comes out, he can go to college or do whatever he wants to do. Now, some of them, well, one, the player who was released, who brought the Fair Labor Standards Act case, went off to law school and sued Major League Baseball, so he found a job as a lawyer. So they go everywhere, and they do all kinds of things.
Aren't a lot of them, when they get a decent signing bonus, usually if they've been drafted after their junior year in college, a lot of them are getting it written in that the organization will pay for them to complete their degree?
Yes, yeah, that a lot of the teams are doing that, yes.
Two things. One, you started out talking about the fan base, and it's always seemed to me that minor league baseball is a local community activity, event, a way of tying people together, identity and so on. But I know you're giving the legal and financial view, but could you tie what you've said back to this great purpose? And then the second one is, please, why are the Nats doing what they are?
Yeah, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be a general manager in charge of the team. On the first one, yeah, that's kind of the magic of minor league baseball. That is one of the things that has allowed us to thrive economically and politically. So when I went around the Hill for the Save America Pastime Act of the Antitrust, what I found is that in virtually every congressional office that I visited, there was reverence and affection and understanding just how critical minor league baseball was. Why is that? So when I go to the winter meetings and I give a speech every year to the owners, I say, look, the reason you have all this currency is Washington. It's not because of me. You know, that it's not about lobbyists and lawyers. It's about what you are doing in your community and the fact that minor league baseball has contributed in kind and in cash $45 million in charities to their local communities. So when there's a hurricane, you know, when there's a disaster, it's the minor league club often that comes in to put the community, you know, back together. That is part of the, you know, the spirit of the community and the people who live in it. So the strength of minor league baseball is that relationship and that role that they play in the community. And it's actually, it's amazing to see because years ago we passed a bill to allow minor league players from outside the United States to come in what's known as P1 visas, which are basically unlimited, as opposed to the H2B seasonal visas that are limited in number. And so we went around and we explained our problem, and we took care of it. And the next day after it became law, I got a call from one of the tech industry lobbies who said, you know, we've been trying to get engineers from Pakistan into the United States for 20 years. You know, we can't get anywhere. How did you get this bill passed? Allowing minor league players to have P1 visas. I said, because the people in the Congress understand and appreciate the contribution that we make in the community, the financial commitment and the glue that we provide in a lot of these towns and cities, some of which we've been in for 75 years. So that's the magic, I think, of minor league baseball. It's not the money, for sure. It's the connection to the community and the fact that we are not seen the way other industries are seen. We are seen, even though we have owners' boxes and $35 million price tags on some of the franchises, we are still seen as community-based activists.
I just want to add a comment to that. And it's affordable for families to go to.
Yes.
Because the national games aren't.
Yes.
The big league games aren't anymore. When I was growing up, I'm from right across the street from Washington, D.C. in Maryland, and my brother was a Senators fan, and you could go to a Senators game as a family. So minor leagues, that's a huge role. That
yes, the average price of going to a minor league game with a family of 4, which is the tickets, the meals, the parking, is something like $67.
Time for the last question.
Yeah,
Is the same situation going on in other sports? I think of a young man who was great on UCLA soccer team and actually was taken into a minor league soccer team. He sat on a bench for a year and decided he'll go off to medical school. But as you were describing what was going on in baseball, I wondered if the same thing was happening in other sports.
it's a little different in other sports. You know, the minor league role in football and basketball is played by the colleges. And so that's, you know, you get out of college, you go directly into major league play. In the minor leagues, you're 4 years away from that, even as a, you know, Division I All-American. Now the NBA has started a development league, and they're paying them $25,000 a year. So they are investing in players in the same way that we are.
This was a soccer player, by
Yeah, well, the MSL, the Major League Soccer is doing a lot of interesting things. I don't know how that system works as well as I know baseball.
Stan.
Thank you.
Very grateful. We have several announcements. We'll just stay in place for a moment. First, I want to tell you about our speaker next month. On October 15th, Susan Benda from the State Department will talk about the State Department's efforts to combat human trafficking. And on a happier note, here's Frances.
Hi, thank you so much, Stan. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it. Thank you. I have several announcements. First and foremost, we have three loaves of bread, two raisin, one multigrain, which Karen is here and very happy to take your $6. The bread, as you know, is marvelous. Secondly, I want to tell you quite a bit about Wise Aging, which is a program we're now going into our 5th year here at Temple Micah. It is for anybody, I would say, that has an AARP card, whether or not you use it. And it's to come together and really learn what the next step in your living process is. So
Don't tell me.
we are.
I don't want to know.
Right. Well, come to our Wise Aging and you'll see all the alternatives. We are hoping to have a class that starts in late October. If you want to know more information, you can talk to Harriet Kinberg, who is raising her hand right here. We have a Wise Aging model lesson the afternoon of Yom Kippur. Anybody and everybody can participate and just see about all the fun that we have together. Also, I want to talk about the Wise Aging Retreat. We are going to have the 4th annual Wise Aging Retreat in June. Barbara Diskin is here and we'll tell you all about that. And apparently places are filling up, so talk to Barbara. And of course, everybody here knows my favorite subject, which is garbage. And it's so very good about staying in your places and not going and interrupting Stan's wonderful presentation. Now, very slowly, you can line up. Please do scrape your plates, put the scrapings in here. Then we are recycling the water glasses, which you can put in the green. Then you proceed and put your silverware in the lovely red container that's on the kitchen counter. You put your plate there and then you leave. and you continue your discussions out here. Or you can help us with the dishes, but thank you so much, everybody.
One quick
Thank you.
question. When you say
Oh, wait,
roster,
wait.
you mean the 40-man roster or
Somebody
the
took a
25-man
cookbook.
roster?
Those were $15.
When they can participate on a per diem?
Thank you so much.
That's what
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I gotta ask you if you know, I'm the Teddy Clark. So there's a kid I used to teach who's making his way up in the Nats organization. His name is Jonathan Stahl. Have you come across him?
You know, there's 5,000 players.
He's in management. He's like.
Oh, he's graduated to executive.
Oh, he never played.
Oh, okay.
He was, and so he's like.
Yeah, I know him. He was
Yeah.
learner organization.
I was his elementary school music teacher.